Most candidates feel confident when they explain concepts and metrics in an interview. They answer questions clearly, and everything seems under control. But then something changes. The interviewer shifts the conversation. They stop asking what things are and start asking what you would actually do. Now imagine this situation. You are asked to run a campaign with a limited budget, no clear data, no proven strategy, and the interviewer asks you, where will you start? At first, you try to think of a structured answer, but then you realize there is no single correct approach, no definition to recall, no fixed framework to follow, and suddenly, you don't feel as confident as before, because now, every decision you make can be right or wrong, and that pressure changes everything. You are not just explaining anymore. You are being evaluated on how you think. And this is where most candidates struggle, not because they don't understand marketing, but because they have never practiced making decisions without certainty. And that is exactly what separates a learner from someone who can actually run campaigns. And that is exactly what we are going to fix here. The biggest shift in this level of interview happens when questions stop being about knowledge and start becoming about decisions. Let's look at this from the interviewer's perspective. Imagine two candidates are given the same situation. A campaign is not performing well. The first candidate starts explaining possible reasons. The answer sounds logical. It feels structured. But the second candidate responds differently. Instead of only explaining, they start making decisions. What they would check first, what they would change next, how they would control the risk. Now something changes. One answer feels like understanding. The other feels like ownership. And that difference is very important because in real campaigns, no one gives you perfect conditions. You have to decide with limited data, with uncertainty. And that is exactly what interviewers are trying to evaluate. Now think about this. A lot of people struggle at this stage. They understand marketing, but they hesitate when it comes to making decisions. You might have seen this with others, or even experienced it yourself. And that is where the real gap exists. Because knowing is one level, but deciding under pressure is a completely different skill. Before we move into real scenarios, it's important to understand how to approach strategy-based questions. Because this is where most candidates lose clarity. Let's imagine a situation. You are given a campaign problem. There is no clear data and no obvious starting point. At first, you try to think of the correct answer. But then something becomes clear. There is no single correct answer. And that is where confusion begins. Because most candidates are trained to respond with fixed explanations. But strategy questions don't work like that. They require you to break the situation into steps. First, understand the goal. Then identify possible variables. Then decide what to test first. Now something changes. You are no longer trying to be right. You are trying to be logical and structured. And that is what interviewers are looking for. But if you don't follow this approach, your answer starts feeling scattered. And even if you know the concepts, it doesn't come across clearly. Because in real campaigns, clarity comes from process, not from memorized answers. Now think about your approach. Are you trying to find the right answer? Or are you building a way to reach the answer step by step? Now let's move into a real situation. Imagine you are given a campaign with a limited budget, no past data, no previous campaigns to learn from. And the interviewer asks you, how will you start? At first, it feels challenging because you don't have enough information. And this is where most candidates make a mistake. They try to cover everything at once. They think about multiple platforms, multiple audiences, multiple creatives, but with a limited budget. That approach doesn't work. Now here's the strategic shift. Instead of doing everything, you focus on doing one thing properly. You choose one platform, one audience segment, one clear message, and you start testing with control. Now something changes. Your decisions become measurable. Your learning becomes faster. Because instead of spreading your budget, you are concentrating it to get clear insights. And that is how strong campaigns begin. Not by doing more, but by starting focused and scaling based on data. Now think about your answer. Are you trying to do everything? Or are you showing how to start with clarity? Now let's take the same situation one step further. Your campaign is running. You have limited budget. But now you have some initial data. One ad set is performing better than the others. Now the interviewer asks you, how will you allocate your budget? At first the answer feels obvious. You might think, put all the budget into the best performing ad. And for a moment, that feels like the right move. But then something changes. What if that performance is temporary? What if the data is not strong enough yet? Now imagine you shift everything, and suddenly performance drops. Now your entire budget is at risk. And that's where the decision becomes more complex. This is where strategy matters. Instead of shifting everything immediately, you scale gradually. You increase budget on the performing ad, but you still keep testing other variations. Now something important happens. You reduce risk while still improving performance. Because in real campaigns, decisions are not just about maximizing results. They are about controlling uncertainty. Now think about your answer. Are you making aggressive decisions? Or are you balancing growth with risk? Now let's look at a more difficult situation. Your campaign is running, but performance is dropping. Clicks are coming in, but conversions are low. And the interviewer asks you, what will you do? At first, many candidates jump to quick fixes. Change the ad, change the targeting. But then something important happens. Without understanding the problem, every change becomes a guess. Now imagine this situation. You change the ad, but conversions still don't improve. You change the audience, but results remain the same. Now something changes. The pressure increases because you are making changes, but nothing is improving. And this is where most people get stuck. They keep trying different things, hoping something will work, but the problem is still unclear. This is where strategy begins. Instead of reacting, you start diagnosing. You check where the drop is happening. Is it the ad engagement? Is it the landing page experience? Is it the offer itself? Now something changes. Your decisions become targeted. Your fixes become meaningful. Because in real campaigns, solving the problem matters more than making changes. Now think about your answer. Are you reacting quickly? Or are you identifying the real issue before acting? Now let's move to another important situation. Your campaign is performing well. Conversions are coming in. Cost is under control. And now the interviewer asks you, when will you scale this campaign? At first it feels simple. You might think, if it's working, just increase the budget. And for a moment, that feels like the right decision. But then something changes. What if scaling too early breaks performance? What if the audience gets exhausted? Now imagine this situation. You increase the budget aggressively, and suddenly your cost starts rising. Your conversions drop, and now you lose the stability you had before. Now here's the important shift. Before scaling, you pause and reevaluate. Is the data stable enough? Is the performance consistent over time? Only then, you start scaling in steps. You monitor results. You check if performance holds. And then you increase further. Now something changes. You grow without breaking the system. Because in real campaigns, scaling is not about speed. It is about sustainability over time. Now think about your answer. Are you scaling aggressively? Or are you scaling with control and consistency? Now let's look at a situation that confuses a lot of candidates. Your campaign is getting good traffic. Clicks are high. Engagement looks strong. But conversions are not happening. And the interviewer asks you, what could be the problem? At first, many candidates focus only on the ads. They think, maybe the targeting is wrong. Maybe the creative needs to change. But then something important happens. What if the problem is not in the ad at all? Now imagine this situation. Your ads are bringing the right audience. But when they land on your page, they don't take action. Now something becomes clear. The issue might be beyond traffic. This is where strategy shifts. You start looking at the full funnel. Is the landing page clear? Is the offer strong enough? Is there trust and clarity for the user? Now something changes. You stop blaming the ad and start analyzing the entire journey. Because in real campaigns, traffic does not guarantee results. Experience creates conversions. Now think about your answer. Are you only looking at the ad? Or are you analyzing the complete funnel? Now let's look at a situation where many candidates feel stuck. Your campaign is running, but you don't have enough data yet. Clicks are low, conversions are inconsistent, and the interviewer asks you, what decision will you make? At first, it feels uncomfortable because there is not enough information to be fully confident. And this is where most candidates hesitate. They wait for more data. They delay decisions. But then something important happens. In real campaigns, you don't always have perfect data. Now imagine this situation. If you wait too long, you lose time and budget. If you act too quickly, you risk making the wrong move. Now the question becomes, how do you balance this? This is where strategy comes in. You make small, controlled decisions. You test in limited scope. You observe early signals. And based on that, you adjust your approach. Now something changes. You are not waiting, and you are not reacting blindly either. You are managing uncertainty with control. Because in real campaigns, perfect data is rare, but smart decisions are always possible. Now think about your answer. Are you waiting for certainty? Or are you managing uncertainty step by step? Now let's look at a situation where real decisions become difficult. Your campaign is running, but performance is not improving. You've tested different ads. You've adjusted targeting, but results are still not stable. And the interviewer asks you, when will you stop this campaign? At first, this feels like a tricky question because no one wants to stop too early. But at the same time, continuing a weak campaign can waste budget. Now imagine this situation. You keep running the campaign, hoping performance will improve. But nothing changes. Now your cost keeps increasing, and results remain low. This is where strategy becomes critical. You don't just focus on effort, you focus on outcome. Instead of running endlessly, you define clear decision points. How long will you test? What results are acceptable? And if those conditions are not met, you stop or pivot the campaign. Now something changes. You take control of the situation instead of reacting emotionally. Because in real campaigns, knowing when to stop is as important as knowing when to scale. Now think about your answer. Are you holding on too long? Or are you making decisions based on clear criteria? At this point, something important should start becoming clear. Strategy questions are not about finding the perfect answer. They are about showing how you think in uncertain situations. Let's imagine a situation. Two candidates are asked the same strategy question. The first candidate gives a structured answer. It sounds correct. It feels complete. At first, it seems like a strong response. But then the interviewer asks a follow-up question. What will you do if this approach doesn't work? Now something changes. The first candidate pauses because the answer was prepared but not flexible. Now the second candidate answers differently. Instead of trying to sound perfect, they explain how they would approach the situation, what they would check first, what they would change next. Now something feels different. One answer sounds prepared. The other adapts in real time. And that difference is very important. Because in real campaigns, your first decision doesn't always work. You have to adjust and decide again. And that is the real skill. Not finding the perfect answer, but knowing how to move forward when things don't go as planned. Now think about your own answers. Are you trying to sound correct? Or are you showing how you think under pressure? Now think about your own preparation for a moment. When you practice interview questions, what are you actually focusing on? Are you trying to remember the right answer? Or are you preparing yourself to handle different situations? Let's imagine a situation. You prepare an answer perfectly. You rehearse it multiple times. At first, it feels smooth. You feel confident. because everything sounds structured. But then in the interview, the question is slightly different. Now something changes. Your prepared answer doesn't fit exactly. And for a moment, you hesitate because you were ready to recall, not to adapt. Now compare that with a different approach. Instead of memorizing answers, you understand the logic behind them. So even if the question changes, you adjust naturally. Now something feels different. Your answers flow better. Your confidence stays stable. Because you are not recalling, you are thinking in real time. And that is what creates a strong impression. Because in real interviews, questions don't always come in the same format. But strong thinking always adapts. Now think about your preparation. Are you training yourself to remember? Or to respond and adjust? At this stage, most candidates face one common problem. They understand the situation, but they struggle to move forward with a decision. At first, it feels like they need more clarity, more data, more confirmation. But then something happens. They delay the decision, and that creates a new problem. Because in real campaigns, waiting too long can be as risky as acting too fast. Now imagine this situation. You're unsure about your next step, so you keep analyzing, looking for the perfect answer. But the campaign is still running, budget is still being spent, and no real improvement is happening. Now something becomes clear. Overthinking becomes a limitation. And this is where strategy shifts. Instead of waiting for perfect clarity, you move forward with controlled decisions. You test in smaller steps. You observe results. And based on that, you refine your approach. Now something changes. You are no longer stuck. You are progressing with direction. Because in real campaigns, momentum matters. And progress comes from action, not hesitation. Now think about your answer. Are you overthinking and delaying? Or are you moving forward with controlled decisions? So at this point, something important should become very clear. Strategy in digital marketing is not about knowing more. It is about deciding better. Let's look at what most candidates do. They focus on learning new concepts, new tools, new techniques. At first, it feels like progress because they are gaining more knowledge. But then something happens. When they face a real situation, they still feel unsure. And now they try to fix it by learning even more. More videos, more topics, hoping this time they will feel confident. But when the next situation comes, the same hesitation appears again. And now something changes. It no longer feels like a knowledge gap. It starts feeling like a decision problem. And that is where the real shift begins. Strategy is built through practice, not just through learning. It comes from handling different situations, making decisions, seeing what works and what doesn't. Now something changes. You stop depending on perfect answers and start trusting your thinking process. Because in real campaigns, you will never have complete certainty, but you will always need to decide. Now think about your preparation. Are you focusing only on learning? Or are you building your decision-making ability? So if you are preparing for digital marketing interviews, it's important to understand one simple thing. Your goal is not just to answer correctly. Your goal is to show how you think. Because once your thinking becomes clear, your answers become more natural. You don't hesitate as much. You don't depend on memorized responses. And slowly, your confidence starts building. But here's what most people don't realize. This change doesn't just improve one answer. It improves everything. The way you explain, the way you respond, the way you handle unexpected questions. And over time, interviews stop feeling like pressure. They start feeling like conversations. And that is where real control begins. Because at that point, you are not trying to prove what you know. You are simply explaining what you understand. And that is exactly what interviewers are looking for. Now, if you know someone who is preparing for interviews, this can really help them avoid the mistakes most people make. So feel free to share this with them. And in the next part of this series, we'll go even deeper into real case-based scenarios where strategy meets execution. Watch the previous parts, stay connected, and I'll see you in the next one.